Greetings everybody, welcome to a Marvel Avengers Alliance Redux video on G4G. I am your host and narrator Napalm Dawn, and today we are going through questions that were posed to the writers group, and we're going to look at their introduction and their answers. So, a little bit of backstory over here. On the channel before, I've interviewed the lead developer, Goofy Troll, at one point in time, and put the responses up in a YouTube video so people could get to know Goofy as well as the rest of the team knows him. Then I did a video that was a clarion call for artists, spriters, animators to get involved in the project so that we had some graphical support for new characters and modifications to existing characters for uniforms and everything. And I felt it was time for the writers group to get their day in the sun too, because in all honesty, without them there is no real game to play. I mean, obviously Goofy's working on the code, but unless the writers team is doing new content, there will come an eventual stop for everybody when they have consumed all of the old content, and then what? You will just come to a cliff with nothing there. So the writers group is completely the meat and bones of the project, and it was time for them to get their presence out there in the world. So before we continue, there are two caveats that I want to talk about here. One, as always, don't ask about the mobile version. I'll say it 100 times. I'll say it until I'm blue in the face. For iOS, you cannot have an IPA loaded on an iOS device unless you are jailbroken, so a version for iOS is completely out. As for an Android version, go see the video that I did on my channel about that. I'll answer those questions. Do not discuss anything about the mobile version down in the comments below. The other two caveats that I want to talk about, so three overall. When in this video I reference the dev team, it is not a reference to Goofy Troll as the game's developer. The dev team within the writing group has to do with those who develop, in other words, take building blocks and build a character or something up from the ground. So if you see a reference to dev or development, do not for this video think it means Goofy Troll, but think it means development within the confines of the writers group. And finally, this Q&A session, this interview that you see before you, is not in any way, shape, or circumstance free reign to message these writers and begin to bug them with questions. Are we getting so-and-so? Are you going to do this? Are you going to do that? You can leave those questions down in my video comments, as I always curate them to the team. And they have even spawned some interesting discussions. Like, for example, somebody in a recent video talked about potentially Asgardians versus the Greek gods. And I was like, wow, that is actually a very interesting idea. So I threw it to the writers group and said, hey, somebody mentioned this. This could be fun. And they run with it. So I always take your comments and move them to the writers group if they're valid, but do not harass, harangue, cajole, private message, direct message, bug in any way, shape, or form any of the people you see referenced in this video. They're extremely busy. They have a lot of work to do. You can leave the questions in the comments below, as they are, of course, going to get linked to this video. It's about them. They may choose to respond or not. And lastly, going forward, there are questions that I pose to the writing team for myself, questions that I pose to the writing team for you, the viewers of the channel, and questions that I pose to them for themselves to give them a moment to shine and highlight their hard work. When I get to those questions, I will point them out at the time. This is not a video with a lot of intense stuff going on the screen, so you're more than welcome to treat this video podcast style and listen to it in a car while you're stuck in traffic, because God knows I don't want to hear my voice on a good day. But if you're going to be stuck in traffic and you've got nothing else to do, let's have at it. And by the way, I was sick as a dog last week, so if my voice is slightly off, you'll have to forgive me, at least for that, but it's a lot better than it was. So Question 1. Please introduce yourselves and name your position if you have one within the writer's team. Bridget Rocks, aka BR. There are no named roles in the writer's team other than Black Max as the leader, known as BM. The name role I do have here is the development team leader, not coders, but guys who come up with the movesets, etc. So there you go. There's the explanation of development or dev within the confines of this video. Modern Panda, just a writer, dev, and admin. BM, writing group team leader and facilitator. Diabetic Kirby, howdy, I'm Diabetic Kirby, or Curbs, and I'm another slightly chaotic writer. Studying my 3rd year for a history degree, generally pretty scatterbrained. Oh, and I tend to be the note keeper when we do take notes and do daily notes, and it's a power I probably shouldn't have. Dr. Midnight. I'm the old guy, 68, on the writing team. I tend to focus on older characters. Even my name and avatar are golden age. I also dabble in research and do a special project now and then. Pause for a second. As I go through these introductions, you will see people begin to kind of spin up a character. Not on purpose. It's literally who they are. You will see common threads amongst an individual as we go through the questions here. Dr. Midnight's response here is a prime example of that. That's why as I read more and more of these answers today, I got more and more happy, because it really sheds light on who each one of these writers are. They're themselves as individuals, their individual personalities, and how they intricately work as minor threads in a larger rope that is the writers group. But come back to this part over here when you're done listening to their answers, and you'll see how here in this very first question, a lot of them will give you the roadmap of their answers throughout the rest of the video. Genghis Ken, no formal position. I'm a member of the writing team. Jace Lightborn, I'm Jace and part of the art and dev teams. I'm not a writer, and if I remember, I'm the only non-writer dev. Shout out to Lightborn for a second. I encountered him on Reddit back when it was the Gaming Life Beginner Project, and we were all like talking about ideas for the game moving forward. Jace's ideas really struck me at the time on Reddit, and I tended to jibe with a lot of what he was recommending and inventing, and I liked his work, and I tried to help get him from Reddit to Discord and make the introductions and everything. I liked what I was seeing from him on Reddit, and I just wanted to point that out over here as an example of how this group has expanded and where everybody's come into the group from over the months. Kelvin KHR, no position, just another dev and writer. Lafong, just a writer. I tend to focus more on script doctoring than plotting. Lord, hey, my name is Lord. I'm from Australia. I believe I'm the newest writer on the team, having joined in September of last year, but I have the same role as everybody else. Wild writer, writer and dev team member, the people who make character kits, not the coders. Question 2. When did you first experience Marvel Avengers Alliance? You've heard through my videos that I got into it way back in the beta because of the lead developer being out there on, Justin Woods being out there on G4 TV, talking about the game and everything like that. I still haven't dug up, well, I sort of managed to dig up the episode where he talked about it, but it was very, very buried in the annals of the internet. So, for me, I've been involved with it since before it was even in whole global production. So BR, I think pretty early on, right after it went out of beta, I did leave for a while between Magneto's Lockboxing and Wonderman Spec Ops, and then remained a player until the end. Modern Panda, launch date. I searched up Marvel on Facebook around January 2012, noticed the game, signed up for launch date, and played it from March 2012 to close. So I kind of come very close to echoing Panda over here. BM, a friend turned me onto it. My first SO was the Hellstrom Op, where I got my doors blown off by Blackheart in a group boss fight. I didn't know about a Succubus companions. Things got better from there. Diabetic Kirby, Chapter 8 of Season 1, so early-ish. I knew DC heroes more, but loved a couple Marvel ones, so when the game appeared, it was a perfect opportunity to learn of a bunch of more heroes. I am the opposite of Kirby on this one. I know Marvel way more than DC, and am more emotionally invested in Marvel than DC. Dr. Midnight, before there was a Facebook MAA, Playdom had the game on their own website. True. Often forgotten, but very, very true. While it's still very much the same, most of us would say it was better. When I joined, I was placed in Guild Epsilon. We became the Trout Nation. Loved it. Gold tournaments, no gift limits. Chat was built into the game. So I had 2 accounts, made Spartan on both, which is ridiculously impressive. Played both until the very end, which is ridiculously impressive. In fact, I still had 1 web grenade left when the game ended. So for those who don't know, you could originally play at playdom.com. It was a separate entity from the Facebook version until they merged. I started on Facebook, and I was essentially alting over on playdom.com, so it was my weaker of the two. Genghis Khan, I believe it was about 2 to 3 weeks of launch, was a casual until I left the game permanently when MAA 2 debuted. Very interesting. This is not something you hear particularly often, people leaving MAA 1 for 2. Considering how many people declared that 2, quote-unquote, killed 1, that's interesting. You'll find a lot of these moments here as we go through these questions where you'll have very, not shocking in a bad way, but very surprising responses to some of these questions. Jace, who was recommended to me by a friend in 2012, he quit, though, but I persisted until the game closed in 2016. Kelvin played it around when it first started. Lafong, I was skeptical about it during the whole run-up to the release. Then I played it on day 1 and stuck to it to the bitter end. Lord started in the Ghost Rider Spec Ops 4 until the game closed, though I started playing less near the end. I also played MAA 2 when it came out, LOL. I did play a little bit of MAT myself. I played MAA 2 quite extensively and covered it a lot on the channel until they both died, but my MAA2 never cut my MAA time over there. Wild Rider, it's complicated. I started playing the iOS version. Wild Rider's response is very shocking on this one. I would not expect something like this. It's complicated. I started playing the iOS version first and actually started a few weeks after that version launched. I played the iOS version for a while, but started having phone issues, so I briefly switched over to the Playdom version during the Kazar Spec Ops. But then my phone got upgraded, so I went back to the iOS version for 9 more months before totally abandoned by Playdom. I then switched to the Facebook version during the Ant-Man Spec Ops, played till I shut down. Wild Rider comes in as a real card through these responses over here. He's the one that has the responses that just come out of left field on me over here. This bouncing around that he did from like iOS to iOS to main part 2 was really shocking, and again, the most unique response that I've seen to people playing the game. What would you consider a highlight of Marvel Avengers Alliance when you were playing? Bridget Rocks. Definitely getting to Adamantium for a couple hours, but other than that, I remember being super excited about the Apocalypse SO. So, I do have the list of Spec Ops over here to reference. So that was the Horseman one. Although this alphabetical list doesn't always help, I want more of a list of them actually in order, but the Avengers Alliance wiki's still up. It's a good reference. Panda, getting Deadpool as soon as he was purchasable, and the HMSO. I think Panda means Heimdall on this one. That's my guess. Black Max, the strategizing. I always enjoyed finding ways to beat the game with my limited characters and without spending money. I definitely agree personally with the first part of this. I mean, I did spend some money, and by a certain point my characters were no longer limited, but the strategizing was something I very, very much enjoyed. I played this game as I would have played Magic the Gathering, and like designing crazy decks and everything like that. I've always mentioned that, and BM and I definitely share at least that part of it. Diabetic Kirby, the roster. MAA made sure to pull from its entire catalog and find characters everyone would love. Parentheses, Brother Voodoo and Moon Knight became personal Marvel faves because of this game. I agree completely with Kirby. I think the roster was amazing, and the fact that they were able to touch every dark corner of Marvel that they wanted to, up until when they started abandoning the mutants, was really amazing. And to further expand on what Kirby's saying, I like that it introduced me to so much stuff that I just never knew before. The Runaways, to me, speaking as myself, was the biggest for that. Dr. Midnight, PvP tactics. I even started a group that tested different weapons and teams for PvP and helped others. That and Spec Ops. Every time an SO would hit, some of us would race to see who could figure out all the tasks for the task list and where we could save ISOs. Very, very handy. The Avengers Alliance wiki used to mention a lot of this stuff, and if Dr. Midnight was ever part of the people that information would come from, then I personally really appreciated that work, because I would reference it and it was super handy. So thank you from me to you, Dr. Midnight. Genghis Ken, I did figure out a Gambit 8-stack trick with P5 magic ability proc. That was pretty neat. Jace Lightborn, the introduction to new characters from nearly unheard of factions such as the Inhumans and Runaways. There they are. Runaways is everybody's little darling favorite, and I'm perfectly okay with that, because I agree. And even the M13, new heroes, story chapters, Spec Ops were always exciting for me, said Kelvin. Lafong, the Ghost Rider Spec Ops stands out to me. This was the first and most vivid example of theme storytelling possibilities that the game would go on to explore so well. Lord, being able to stay in Adamantium for a large chunk of the PvP seasons whenever the SOs released with awesome new content, using Fixer to pretty much one-shot group bosses. I hear Lord on that. I used to team him up with Enchantress to do similar stuff, because you could do passive non-attacking things with Fixer that kind of wouldn't consume the boss's turns and set him up for big damage. And Wild Rider, finally getting my first Season 2 Chapter Mastery alt. I think it was Cyclops. It was the last month or two of the game's life, but it felt really great getting one of those. Poor Wild Rider. I feel like he missed out on so much. Through these responses, I just get more and more sad for Wild, that I feel like he had some holes in his, not due to his own fault, but I feel like he had some holes in the experiences there. And that's the kind of person that when this game comes out as MAAR, I'm looking forward to their enjoyment of spackling up all those gaps that they had from doing mobile versions and everything like that. Question 4. Do you have any low points from your time with MAA other than the game closing? I feel I had to add that there because that would be everybody's response. My question here was to have dark in the presence of light. You can't just talk about the high points if you don't admit to yourself what were low points about the game. So that's why this question's here. BR, the sudden 2 here release. I think that was a sign of the end, though. Not sure if it's not one and the same. Modern Panda, due to bad Wi-Fi situations, not being able to play as consistently as I wanted, resulting in falling further and further behind. BM, as the game got larger, it became more and more broken. I and a lot of others came up with all kinds of improvements and workarounds, some of which had some level of success. Almost at the end of the game, I found out in a conversation with the Playdom dev, they never read our suggestions and pleas for assistance in the PD forums. If I can interject me here at this point on what BM said, I feel bad for this response. I really do. I feel devs are always very insulated from the public, and they should be. If you watch the movie Office Space, and the guy who eventually would go on to get hit by the car, and he's like, well, what do you do here? He's like, well, I take the specs from the customer, I get the specs from the customers and I do stuff. Well, do you physically go get them? No, my secretary goes gets them, but I talk to them. She just gets them and gives them to me. He sets himself up basically so very isolated from the people he's designing for that he never has that direct connection. And seeing BM's response here really triggered something within me when I read it. And then as I I felt bad that there exists a person that was in this situation that realized there is no Santa in this sort of, and if I was ever a dev in the developer sense, the goofy troll sense, the coder sense, I know I would want to isolate myself from the public for fear of going absolutely criminally insane by reading everybody's responses and takes on things, especially now in modern years. Back, you go back 4 or 5 years, it wasn't that bad, but by the same token, I would like to distill some great ideas. One of the ideas that I had when the game was live is we need a defensive simulator where we could put on our PvP defense team and watch the AI beat on it to see what our defense does. If I was a dev and I was just reading somebody saying that on the forums, I would like to see that and go, hey, wow, that's kind of a good idea. Not because it was my idea, but because it seems strategically like a good idea. I would like to stick my head out of the sand every now and then, kind of peek around and be like, what are people suggesting? And I feel bad that this was a revelation that somebody had to go through and find out that they didn't. But again, that's what a community manager's for. You look at World of Warcraft, CM is a hireable position that takes the best parts and not the trolling of the community and tries to pass it to the devs. I feel like if there was a CM for Playdom, then this revelation here is sad that nobody distilled down the good stuff to them. Diabetic Kirby. Too much time trying to win in PvP or earn just a bar of gold. It was unfair how much stuff got locked away for a while, unless you were willing to cough up some cash, especially if you left for a month. Dr. Midnight, there was that one freaking weapon that everybody else seemed to have, but I didn't. Right up until the end, I never did get that one. Next time for sure. I'm curious as to what it is. I wonder if it's the cube, or the Scroll of Runamaroth, or I don't know. Cube is a big one in this slot. I had a lot of people come up to me and tell me they were jealous that I got the Savant Spear, which was not that much to write home about, other than I think it did generalization. But I'm curious as to what Midnight is referencing there. I'm going to go out on a limb and say it's the cube, but I don't know. Genghis Ken, earning gold through incentive purchases through florists. With the girlfriend wondering why she was erratically getting flowers. Yeah, Ken, I'm with you on that one. I definitely got my fair share of Mother's Day gifts and shit through those, like, here's 24 gold if you get $50 worth of fucking 1-800-Flowers through us, or proflowers.com, I think is what it was. So, yeah, I'm right there with Ken. I did it too for a while until I realized I could just, like, get the gold for the same amount. But Jace, the lockboxes were a drain. I spent a lot of time just to get Taskmaster lockboxes and almost quit. Kelvin, inability to get higher than gold in PvP. Lafong, just the occasional burnout, but it never lasted long. Lord, missing out on cable, barely. I know that feeling, the season of, I've said this one 100 times, this is an old record, the Beyond Corp can opener. I was really trying for Diamond on that one to get that weapon, and I was just shy, and I regretted it till the end of the game. Wild Rider, not switching over to the FB version earlier. I stayed with the mobile version for way too long. Right, if I could just kind of pat you on the head for that one and say I'm sorry, because that's all that I want to do. Question 5. How did you come across information that MAA Revival was beginning? So, in other words, how did you know either the Goofy version or the Gaming Life Beginner version? BR, I think it was on the MAA Fanfic Wiki. I used to be pretty active when the wiki was a thing. If I'm not mistaken, I ran into the link there. Panda, I used to voice chat with a couple of MAA YouTubers. Biggie's Let's Play, which I don't really know, and Inhuman Beatdown. I'm, as I sip my coffee here, going to sort of make a face at Inhuman Beatdown and just reference the fact that I remember him crying about the game and then leave it alone. Because Mom always said, if you can't say something nice about somebody, just reference the time they were crying on YouTube. When Biggie came back, one of the people in the group chat mentioned the revival and asked if he would record gameplay of it when he came back. I asked for the server link, and here I am. So you'll find the variety here is crazy. There is a huge variety of where people said they've come into the project from. And that's good because it shows the tendrils of the project are reaching out everywhere rather than just being one trunk of information, because then people could miss it if they never encounter that big thick tree in the middle of the park. Rather than tripping over all the roots, then they're going to miss out. BM, I honestly don't remember the beginning of it. I joined the Facebook group when Twig made me a group admin. Shortly thereafter, I joined the writers group, and Jason put me in charge of it. Jason being goofy. Diabetic Kirby, the subreddit was reminiscing, and I saw a post about Discord for the project back in 2018. So now we have Reddit, which is good because there is an MAA and an MAAR Reddit. Dr. Midnight, I think I was invited to join the FB group by someone back in the early days of the group. Genghis Ken, I used to watch your Twitch streams, ND. Ended up looking up your YouTube link from Twitch and saw the video for MAR, hopped into Discord, joined the team, and started doing the dialogue for Heroic Battles. Took a break, came back after the staff shuffle, and started working on main Season 3 content. Jace, through my Reddit account, I was posting theoretical characters, and Sir Zygarde, Curbs here, that's my old username, I still have on Reddit, invited me to Discord. So, there's Lightborn, as I was mentioning earlier when he used to do the kits on Reddit. Kelvin, I think it was a page on the wiki somewhere. Lafong, I saw something on Facebook, I think. I honestly don't remember now. Lord, it was posted ages ago on the MA Reddit, if I remember correctly. I don't believe the Discord server existed back then, but I was randomly reminded of the game and the project and joined the Facebook group and Discord server mid-2019. I used to be very active on the fanfic. Somebody mentioned it on Reddit one time. I can't remember which sub it was through. Either it was through Swiggo, MFF, or MSF. And from there I found the Facebook group and joined the Discord in fall 2018. So, as you can see, our ideas of getting the word out to as many of the common grouping areas has worked. You've got Reddit, you've got YouTube, you've got other places where people congregate on Marvel games. So, proud to see that happen. Question 6. How do you feel about the opportunity to write content for MAAR? So this is asking the writers group, how do they feel about creating stuff for this new game? This is original content beyond what Playdom had done. Bridget Rocks. It's truly a blessing. I wrote Marvel fanfic for years before joining the team, and I'm grateful for the experience and chance to contribute. Panda. It's an honor and privilege to write for MAAR. Every day is a blessing. BM. I love it. I get to engage in the kind of writing I've never done to any real extent before, and I get to collaborate with wildly talented groups of writers who come up with fantastic ideas that I never thought to do. Kirby, elated but nervous since my writing is almost always for analytical or historical purposes, so narratives don't come easy. Ideas, though. Just in these few responses here, you get to see who is the technical people, who are just the puke up the idea people, who are the people who enjoy the writing. This question was a little bit for me as well as you guys, because I like to do nearly all forms of this. I've had my major in college was communications based, and there was a reason for that. It's because I enjoy the ideas and the writing process, and I wanted to pick other people's brains, but also give them a chance to express their personality. And having written a Spec Ops myself, which I'm not going to go into detail on, I've gone into some detail on some other videos, but having written an SO myself that once I convert over to their format may or may not get approved, which is why I can't talk about it, because if it does get approved, then I've revealed stuff. But I partly did that because I wanted to, but partly did that because I wanted to know how these guys live. It was a way of putting on their shoes and walking for a mile. And seeing their responses here definitely goes to show you just how complicated and tough all of this stuff is. Dr. Midnight. It's fun and interesting. I specialize in Golden and Silver Age fiction. So remember when I said people's responses to the first question would dictate their character through the rest of the questions? Dr. Midnight kind of comes through over here. He mentioned he was older, and here he's mentioning the golden and silver age of Marvel Comics and everything. So you'll see that thread come down with people over here. Plus, I have the opportunity to meet some really nice people. There is also an opportunity to learn about characters I've never heard before. Ken. I went to write a D&D campaign, but just play it by myself and DM it myself. I've been informed I wrote a book. The sentiment in the above meme pretty much explains everything. Is Ken. Lightborn. NA, I'm not a writer. Kelvin, it's fun, even if I feel I can't contribute much in the way of ideas. Lafong, I love it. Such a huge array of characters to play with. Lord, it's an awesome opportunity that I'm honored to have. I want to pursue a career in writing and designing games in the future. This is good experience, though not official. Wild Writer, it's been amazing. I wanted to pursue a career in screenwriting for the past few years, and this has been great, if not an official and sketchy experience. These two highlight something that resonates with me. I've been leading a World of Warcraft guild since 2004, and prior to that I was leading a division within a clan, and it was the UT99 2K4 division, so I've been leading people since like 2000. These two, what Lord and Wild Rider have said, resonate with the fact that I've managed a group of people for a long time, but I can't put that on a resume, and I can't tell somebody that of like, hey, I think I'm a decent manager, because I've kept a group of people together without any like huge blow-ups for, decades. Lord and Wild Rider have the same thing where it's hard to speak of this experience because of its informal nature, except Lord, for writing and designing games, he in a way can reference it. I understand the reservation about linking somebody an original work that was based off of a published work. You never know how people are going to react to it, but I encourage Lord and Wild to really enjoy this experience and take as much out of this as you can, because you will find later on, even if you can't directly talk about it, it will shape you, and you will find ways of using the experience. Question 7. I've noticed that MAAR original content is very good at staying very tight thematically. How hard is it to produce works from multiple writers and keep the style throughout the works? Background, I've gone and edited a bunch of their submittals, their written staff submittals for Spec Ops and everything like that. So I have experience in their original works, and I can tell you that except for possibly one writer, there's a theme that runs, a style that runs through all of their works, and knowing that there's so many people who contribute, an absolute shout out goes to the writing team for the fact that they can take people's styles from different angles and make it come out the other side. Like meat going into a grinder, you can put in some pork, you can put in some beef, you can put in some chicken, but what comes out that grinder is always going to be pretty universal, and they do an amazing job of that. So this question was to highlight them and their hard works. So Bridget rocks. It's a challenge, but there are revisions done after stuff is finished to keep it in line with previous content from Playdom and our own. Panda, it's easier than expected. Black Max, that's what I'm there for. Reminder, BM oversees the writers group, so take that into consideration when you see his response here. The writers come up with a huge variety of ideas, and it's my job to keep them focused and tight. Otherwise, what Kirby said, consensus is key. Kirby, easier than expected. We tend to write after a good consensus and then go back over it and make suggestions or change phrasing. Midnight, it's nice to see how ideas can feed off each other and lead to others and sometimes better ideas. Genghis Ken, sometimes it's hard work, sometimes it's easy. Thankfully, due to the stability of the writing team roster, the results are tight on the thematics, and the continuity is a bit closer to like writing a television show. Jace, not answer. Kelvin didn't answer. Lafong, I assume Black Max will take care of it. Lord, we're a team, but BM keeps us in line. Wild Rider, BM beats us senseless when we get out of line. Just kidding, he's not that mean. He does a great job of keeping us on track. Question 8. Do you have anybody on the writing staff you feel your style really clicks with? This is one of those ones where, again, I wanted the writing team to use this question to express their personalities. BR, in terms of themes, definitely more in line with Dubs and BM. We're more into the political aspect of things, less powers, more realistic stuff. Think Captain America the Winter Soldier. That response kind of resonates with me because Winter Soldier is one of my favorite of all the Marvel movies, and I realized it has to do with the Empire Strikes Back syndrome. It's the more realistic one, the darker one of them all, and I think it stands out, and I could certainly appreciate what BR is saying in this one. And then coming in from the flip side of it, Panda. Kirby and I share a love for writing magic. So you have two very distinct styles here. You've got the magic and mystical, and then you have the almost not superpowered version. BM. I can engage with just about anybody on the team. Everyone has their preferences. I can work with just about all of them in their preferred areas. Diabetic Kirby. Not one person, to be honest. Ken and BM for making sure an idea makes sense or fits our framework. Even though I've gotten annoyed at them for that in the past, it helps clean up the wackier stuff I've pitched. Dubs and Panda match with me over magic or big arcs and ideas, and everybody else tends to click with me when we keep a following train of thought until they come to a proper stopping point. Ryder and I came up with a cool Spec Ops that takes place about mid-season 3, all because of this method, for an example. Dr. Midnight, I think it varies from one chapter or Spec Ops to the next, but everybody's pretty much great to work with. Ken, ironically, I think I clash with a bit of the other writers. I'm a bit retentive with the continuity of the character voice and the dialogue. Jace, N.A., Kelvin didn't answer. LaFong, Max and I are pretty simpatico. Lord, Ryder always has good ideas that expand upon what we may be discussing, and we really click when brainstorming, but otherwise I would hope that I also get along with the rest of the team. Panda shows me the ropes and is very reliable, while BM is invaluable. Usually, level-headed leader who keeps the team together. And then Ryder says, I get along well with pretty much everybody. In particular, Lord and I are pretty good at brainstorming and bouncing ideas off each other, since we have similar tastes for Marvel characters that you feel scared to move forward with due to potential headaches in coding or graphic design of the characters and gear. So this one was me asking the darkest fear. I was curious as to if people felt, when they write their Spec Ops, and their characters and everything, do they feel hamstrung by the fact that a character, we may not have a model that could look like the character, or do we have the graphics people who can make these visions a reality and everything? That's what I was looking for here. If I was a grander part of the writing team, it's something that I would definitely feel could be a stopping factor for me. So BR, absolutely, all the time, as the guy who keeps tabs on the art, it's a thought I have to. Unfortunately, keep enforcing on others. I do hope we get to the point where we have enough artists to do anything. That's, yeah, I echo BR in that. I hope that happens. Panda, yes. I've hit up Goofy on several occasions to make sure it's feasible coding-wise. I like what Panda said here because I've done that on some of my ideas too, and I think it's the best way to approach this, because if you come up with something that didn't exist in PD's code, you want to make sure it's like, hey, can you even code this if I invent it? Because Goofy's always going to be the stopping factor for that, and I think this is a very smart way of approaching it. BM, some of the ideas presented by one writer or another can be mind-blowing, but I've learned to allow the writers to explore them. For one example, we know now how the game will end, whether it's Season 4 or 24. It's a huge, glorious finale, which we will not reveal in any way, shape, or form, and was sparked by a single throwaway comment from a writer. Kirby, yes, some have ended up working out. There's two specific examples that I can think of where we'd be able to use an existing asset to build off of to create new stuff, but most haven't. If people want the crazy shit, then we need the artists. Yeah, we definitely do. Trying not to put a big burden on the art team seems to help the writing team focus more on what can be done, which results in better overall package. Ken, given the current workload on the art team, if something can be accomplished with utilizing existing assets and reducing the requirement for new art, It's my opinion that we take every chance as the writers to make their job easier. It's a direct correlation between having the art assets and freeing up writers to do more within the story. Translation, art is needed. What Ken says here is something that I had experienced. I created a gun for, it was either a one-shot or a spec ops, and what I did was, after knowing that the Playnom dev team really got into Overwatch when it first came out, the Wub Wob cannon is confirmed from Playnom devs as being based off of Lucio's gun. What I did is I reworked an existing asset to theme it off of a different character, which fit with what the writing team was doing, and then I had my girlfriend, who is an artist, change a few things and to make it work. So look, a lot of us come from the generation of palette swapped everything. I mean, Sector and Cyrax, Scorpion, Sub-Zero, Reptile, Smoke. So if something is slightly recolorized, or hair on a bald person, or removing a cloak and changing a glove or something, I think that is completely valid, and you can do more when you know that you can take what's in the game already and just mold it slightly and make it work, than have to worry about a whole new sprite kit and everything like that. So yeah, it's definitely interesting to see the writing team echo that. Jace said, I have this plan, which I won't go into detail yet. Kelvin, believe me, all the time, well, almost all the time. Lafong, yeah, I usually try to think of multiple ways the stories could play out, depending on how many new characters, backgrounds, or whatever we can realistically expect. Lord, reduce, reuse, recycle art assets where possible is a line that I just came up with. We do have to hold back in regards to introducing too much new content at once, so the art team doesn't get overloaded. However, this has allowed us to do things that we already have that are pretty cool. Wild Rider, all the time. There's so much cool stuff we'd love to do, but art load is always our limiting factor. We can use more artists. Question 10. What is the most fun for you to design? Specific writing content such as chapters and spec ops and one-shots, characters, agent gear, or ISOs? BR says characters by far. They're my favorite in-game too. They push the limits in ways gears and ISOs don't, and introduce lots of fun mechanics. Panda, heroic battles, no doubt. I'm going to pause for a second and say that blows my mind that there's somebody very focused on the HBs, and it's good, because here you will see the team begin to separate out into some of their strengths and still be part of a core. If everybody was just good at the same thing, something invariably would fall down and not be nearly as good as the rest. So when you see people spread their talent out in this question, appreciate what everybody brings to the table and realize how they all wrap back into that rope analogy that I said in the beginning, where everybody's a thread, but then everybody twists to make a really strong rope. And somebody who specifically calls out HBs as a strength is really cool. BM, I focus strictly on the writing. One of my favorite aspects is working with everybody's creative ideas to create and craft story arcs that span multiple chapters. So this really highlights BM's strength over here, is that he makes sure he's part of the things that need continuity, and that is really valuable, because if everybody's working in their pockets, or silos as they call in the business world, if everybody is siloed, then everything's going to seem janky and abrupt. And to have somebody that makes sure that an even amount of glue is spread across everything, that takes a lot of effort. Diabetic Kirby, ideas. Like I've said in a different question, I struggle writing narratives, but ideas are the cocaine of the 80s parties writer's room, and for better or worse, I tend to have some wacky thing tumbling around in my head. Honestly, some of the stuff I've pitched, I can't believe we got to use. It's amazing to see how people help bring in the life. Shout out to the writers and artists for helping hammer the thing I helped create in Chapter 5 material into something comprehensible. I kind of feel a little bit of a kindred spirit with Kirby here, is sometimes when I don't get the time to live in the writers groups as much as I would like, but a lot of times when I take, like I said earlier in the video, when I take comments that people leave in the videos and I have my own ideas and I pitch it in there, sometimes it's like throwing a golf ball in a clothes dryer while it's on. You open the door, you fling it in there, and you just watch the writer team either go, no, that's utterly ridiculous, and then just spit it back out, or watch it just tumble around in there and maybe a sock gets stuck to it and maybe a sneaker that's drying lands on it, and then here comes a scarf from being outside in the winter. It's really amazing to see that happen. Or maybe it's like a rock tumbler if you had one as a kid, and you just put the rocks in there and you put the grit and you seal it up and you let it spin for 3 days loud, and it annoys everybody in the house. Dr. Midnight. Spec Ops are my favorite to work on, and it's the very first one we wrote is my absolute favorite of the new content so far. They are nice that they don't have to tie into some grand scheme, and we do get new characters, new weapon sets, and toys to play with. Ken, one-shots are the most fun for me to write. So you can see how everybody's beginning to cover the bases of the writing team. You got Spec Ops, you got Heroic Battles, you got the one-shots. Kelvin will say ISOs here in just a moment, so it's glorious to watch all these little cogs become part of the grander machine here. Lightborn, characters and ISOs are the most fun for me to do. I read a lot of comics. I like to reference a few things from past issues as well as newer arcs. Kelvin, I'd say ISOs, but I must say characters are the most fun because it pushes my imagination. Lafong, I'm all about dialogue, whatever the scene or situation. I love jumping back and forth between pseudo-Shakespearean Asgardian soliloquies and Deadpool making an ass of himself. All these distinctive voices can be tough to nail, but I love to try. Lord, Spec Ops, since they're their own story but are tied into the grand scheme of things while introducing new allies and foes to be utilized in the future all the while. Lockboxes are one of my favorite aspects of MAA, but I personally haven't written for one yet, but I'm pushing certain characters. Rider. Characters, surprisingly, grunts are some of my favorites to do. They're really fun to make. I make at least 85 to 90% of our new grunts. There you go, guys. How amazing is that? Now you have a person saying they don't even write the big characters. They're writing the Hydra minion, the AIM minion, Bob. I mean, it's really just throw a coin to your writers. At this point over here, toss a coin to them, because if anything so far that I've covered deserves a clap, this question is something to stand up and clap for, because they cover everything. So question 11, what is the least favorite for you to design? Again, there's my darkness in the presence of light. BR, probably agent gear. I do enjoy good gear after it's done, but coming up with balance and synergetic stuff is very difficult. Panda, gear. BM, I really can't think of an element of story creation that I don't enjoy, but some things like mechanics for heroic battles are not my thing, so I don't do them. Others are far better at some aspects of story creation than I am. Kirby, dialogue. Give me anything else that I can at least contribute to the discussion, but dialogue feels like I'm a caveman who slaps mud for a living handed a computer. I told Kirby that this response almost had me laughing out loud in the middle of my office as I was reading this. Midnight, trying to write modern day dialogue, then again, I don't understand modern day music either. So here comes Get Off My Lawn, Midnight. Again, there's that theme from his first question. Kelvin, agent gear, to be honest. There are times when I have to worry whether or not I'm too underwhelming or vice versa. Lightborn, I like designing stuff. Lafong, mechanics, gears, heroics, etc. I haven't gotten deep enough into the nuts and bolts to pull that stuff off. Luckily others on the team have. Lord, I'll get back to you on that. And Wild Rider, character dialogue can be tough sometimes with characters' voices as guardians are rather difficult. For dev stuff, agent gear is probably the least fun to do. It just doesn't come easily to me. I again understand where Wild Rider's coming on this one, because, for example, Thor in the movies Thor in the movies has changed much from his first movie where he was regal and kind of majestic in a lot of his speech, like another when he throws the mug down, to what he winds up with in Endgame. So even a character changes their quote-unquote voice over time. So yeah, I can see, like, Deadpool I think is kind of easy to write for because of his fourth wall breaks. You can make Deadpool reference himself and everything like that. But then other characters, like, how effective can you be trying to write for Sif or Heimdall or Coulson? So yeah, I get where they're coming from on this. Question 12. You could go back and redo any of the original MAA works, meaning the Playdom stuff, Spec Ops and chapters, etc. Would you? If so, which one? Bridget rocks. Yes, I think I'd redo the Cammy one. Cammy. Sorry, Playdom folks. Cammy is apparently just the herpes of what you've created. She keeps coming back and flaring up. Nobody wants to deal with a Cammy flare. It always felt underwhelming to me. I'd have never lockboxed many of the villains like Sabretooth, Sinister Six. Panda, yes, I would redo some of the kits. They feel underwhelming. Max, if I'd run MAA, we would have never gotten Doom. So this one surprised me a little bit when I first read it, and I started thinking about it in my head. What is it about Doom that he wouldn't have done? Was it that he started so overpowered? Was it that he ended so underpowered? In case you do not know how underpowered Doom was by the end of the game, you know that, of course, if you ran with Doom, you could only run with the Agent. Well, the Agent and Doom by the end of the game basically had the same hit points, which meant Doom brought nothing to the party anymore. He simply crippled you. You lost 4 abilities at a minimum by bringing him. So I'm kind of curious as to where BM was going on this one. I wish he would have expanded on it further. I'm insanely curious because essentially if you look at Doom's power curve, it was never a power curve or a bell curve. It was simply starting at 90 and then just a jaggy line straight down to like 2. Kirby, I'm with Ken on this. Be smart about choosing lockboxes. Hyperion, Doom, and Kang are just headaches at this point. Not too sure why Hyperion was lumped in over there. I mean, Doom and Kang were underwhelming, but by the end. But Hyperion, not too sure on that one. I think the original game lockboxed too many villains. Genghis Khan, don't haphazardly lockbox villains. B-Dot-Box. There's an episode of Hercules, The Legendary Journeys, called Yes, Virginia, There is a Hercules, where an earthquake hits L.A. and Kevin Sorbo goes missing. The writers try to come up with plans to keep the show going without him, which unfortunately creates a void narratively that leaves the antagonist sitting around playing rock, paper, scissors. The inverse is similarly true. Taking villains out of the pool without replacing them can eventually cause character fatigue in the remaining villains as they fight the Alliance. Ken touches upon a point that Playdom used to use when everybody was like, can we have Mystique? Mystique. I mean, even Twig was like, oh, Mystique. Their point at the time was, if we give you Mystique, who's left in the Brotherhood? We've literally chopped them up and served them to you with some gravy and a really good rice and a nice side salad. Who else is left? Like, we've taken Magneto, we've taken Avalanche, like what King Blob of the Brotherhood. So I understand what Ken is saying here. Jace Lightborn, I wouldn't. It's as good as it is for me. I kind of think along Lightborn's case, like my memories are so treasured in those 4 years with MAA, I don't know that I would redo anything myself. Kelvin, not a thing. Lafong, I see this as the last great game that I played anyway before the monetization and frustration as a business model stuff kicked in. Yeah, absolutely. This game did want your money, true, but it just seemed in a way that was more palatable than Future Fight, and especially Marvel Strike Force and everything. Lafong brings up a huge point, and that's where it's so good that this game is completely free. when you get it. You will never exchange a dime of your country's currency for anything in this, and I think that is amazing, because if we could sit here and say it was amazing back then when we did pay money, the fact that it's universally free is even better. Little stuff like the caveat, which BR already mentioned, gets on my nerves, but this game was so much better and more player-friendly than anything similar that I'm seeing now that I can't complain about in retrospect. Yeah, Lafong has a great answer to this. It shows you how beloved MAA was on a general whole. Lord, I would have introduced or at least alluded to some of the big names who never got added due to the Fox ban with the game. While I disagree with a few of the others on some of the lockbox choices being bad, I do believe that their redemptions could have been better handled. Sabretooth, for instance, despite him being someone I wouldn't have redeemed, could have worked better if done in certain contexts rather than recruiting him to a Suicide Squad. When I started reading their responses and everything was about lockboxes, the first thing that jumped in my head is Sabretooth with the bomb in his head, and it came true as I read the responses over here. I knew somebody was going to say it, and I do admit that's not the best push to make somebody heroic, is, oh gee, I woke up without my kidney in a Mexican ice bath over here. I guess I'll be good until I get my kidney back. Viva los Mexicanos. I mean, it's, yeah. That is a little bit of a rough plot point. Wild Rider. Fix the Winter Soldier and Falcon sprites. Bucky should have gotten a new sprite since it makes no sense for him to punch with his non-mechanical hand. Point. And Falcon should have had his wings out and a better face. Yeah, God, his face was Magoo. Falcon's face was completely a person of color's Magoo face over there. It was bad. I'd also fix up some lacking character kits. Cough thing, cough. There you go, Agent Antidote. There you go. Fuck your thing. Kidding. If you're still watching these, absolutely kidding. But your love of Thing just always came out of left field over there. And shade some of the weird class choices. Why the hell was Green Goblin a scrapper instead of a blaster? Yeah, he didn't really melee anything. What was your favorite Spec Ops? Bridget Rocks. Inhumans, I believe Infinity would be a close second. Panda, Apocalypse, SO16. Black Max, Inhumans, it was a lot of fun. And the Vigilante Toolkit is perfect weapon for my style of playing. I agree. Now remember, the Vigilante Toolkit was super overpowered, then super nerfed, and then brought back up again. So the Vigilante Toolkit actually has a rich history. Kirby, either 16 Apocalypse, 11 Sins of the Father, or 22 Eclipse Phase. So if we go back one over here, Eclipse Phase, Fratricide, that's a name that always sticks with me. Eclipse Phase. Let's see which one that one was. On the eve of a rare solar eclipse, Demons and Blade. Yep, Blade and Morbius, that was a good one. I really liked them all. First one was really tough, though. A favorite, 37, can hardly wait to play that. Favorite because that would mean the game is back and new content is here. A reference to the fact that 36 is where it died and 37 is the first of the new one. So, kudos, Midnight. It stuck that one in there. I like that wedge. That was a good wedge. Genghis Ken, no preference. Jace, Spec Ops 30, Instruments of Darkness, and Land of Ice and Fire. Good. So Land of Ice and Fire was Burb, Beta Ray Bill. Long Live the Queen is a special place since it's the first SO I completed. Kelvin, story-wise, I liked Instruments of Darkness, though Fratricide and Land of Fire and Ice come close. So since I mentioned Fratricide and we see it mentioned there, I believe I remember which. Yeah, that was the Cannonball one with all of the smart gear, the cuffs, and my favorite underrated little nugget, Mark of the Brotherhood. I built a team kind of around that piece of gear, which was fun. Lafong, loved them all. Ghost Rider was pretty great. Lord, I really enjoyed most of the SOs. Havoc's was pretty hype for introducing the concept of lock boxes, despite how frustrating it was to get mags. Been there, done that. I've almost forgotten what it's like to have been there, done that, but I do. Burb was a personal favorite of mine, but I'm even more hyped for the first MAAR original SO, aka 37. Another nice wedge over there. Good job, Lord. Wild Rider. Mantis is SO. I missed out on the original Guardians of the Galaxy one, so I love the MCU one. It was great to finally experience them. Poor Ryder again. Like, one of his favorites is one of the last ones because he just has these holes everywhere. It just feels so bad for Ryder. Question 14. Will the writing team be sneaking any fun or surprising stuff into original MAA content? So what I was going for here is a bit of a reveal without going too far. Like, would they, let's say, everybody's favorite farm one, would they sneak something in there and, like, redo the dialogue to reference that, like, everybody farms it? So I wanted them to see if they said they were going to do it, but not describe what it was. So Bridget rocks, for sure. There are a couple changes we're implementing retroactively that won't change the story at all. Keep your eyes peeled. So that's cool because we've done a lot of us, at least, not Wild Rider. Sorry, Rider. A lot of us have done the old stuff to death, so the fact that there's a little bit of salt and garlic powder on it to freshen it up might increase your desire to do the old stuff and make sure you don't, like, try to skip right to new stuff if you were capable of doing it. Modern Panda, yes, there are tiny details or illusions we made sure to implement. Black Max, absolutely, take nothing for granted. Kirby, I think we will quite easily. My personal goal is to get some more of the weird and obscure characters mentioned. At least Daddy Wronglegs is just too good of a name to pass up for a random deploy. Midnight, we love Easter eggs, and you're going to see a theme starting over here with Ken. In the words of Kevin Feige, sure, why not? Jace, not a writer. Kelvin didn't answer. LaFong, I'm working hard to choke out any hint of fun or surprise to ensure this game is joyless as a slog as I can make it. Nah, just kidding. I think we've all got sorts of wonderful stuff in store, and because we can focus entirely on telling good stories and making sure players have fun without worrying about monetization, we have a lot of freedom. I think players will be really pleased with what the team is doing. Lord says perhaps, and Ryder says, I feel a lot of our stuff is fun and surprising. We're players too, so we only come up with stuff we'd actually find fun to play. Also, there's a particular thing in the first month or so of our content that I'd say is pretty unexpected. Can't say anything more on that. Don't want to spoil the surprise. So, good. That should whet your appetites. MAAR players over here. You should have something to look forward to. Question 15. When the writing team decides to release information about original works, describe the decision-making progress to... or actually, it should have been process. Describe the decision-making process to break silence and reveal content to the general public. So there was a reveal of several things a few months ago, and I wanted to get into the nitty-gritty of what made them decide to release that, but then continue to clamp down other things. Bridget Rock says, so far, it happens whenever there's a big update in terms of code. We did a huge announcement with Photon, Boom Boom, and Armored Constrictor back on the date the game closed. Read as a wonderful little anniversary item over there. We might do a couple more as we get updates from Goofy. Panda, the first time I believe it was a community effort. For future times, I need to get the ball rolling as an admin, which puts me in charge of outreach. So here you can see somebody else establishing their major position. Aside from BM, who oversees a lot of stuff, you can see what Panda's stating he does here for the team. BM, it's interesting finding the balance between what we want to tell you and what we let ourselves reveal. Honestly, my advice if I was sitting in a room with them is keep stuff as tightly as you possibly can, because you want to draw people through the old content to yours. And once people start playing it and they see that the writers team sees that the feedback is good and people love it, and I know what you're going to say, Napalm, you're like, oh, how do you know people are going to love the new people stuff? I'm telling you, you will. This isn't a guess, it's a prediction. I'm pointing out to center field and telling you these guys will hit a home run. I've read their stuff. You'll like it. You truly will, and it is something all of us should look forward to, is getting to the works of this team. So, yeah, keep us salivating a little bit. You want to put a tic-tac on the plate so that we get some moisture in our mouth, that's fine, but let us be hungry for it. Kirby, I suggest ideas, but leave final decisions to the ones coordinating info, normally BR, Panda, and BM. I wish we could pull a Gravity Falls thing and leave coded messages that hint vaguely at what's to come. To be honest, plus Bill Cipher would be a cool representative of our evil trickster voice. Dr. Midnight, it's always fun to see fans' reaction to new content. Genghis Ken says, the 8-Ball says reply hazy, try again later. Lightborn and Kelvin have no answers. LaFong says, I will leave that up to everybody else. I just do dialogue. Lord says, I'm the newest writer on the team, so those kinds of decisions aren't my call. However, I do suggest we would handle reveals if the floor is open. And Ryder says, certain things we want to keep surprises, so we will always be specific in our reveal choices. In addition, we purposefully have chosen not to hint at anything that won't be within the first few months of content. That's good. Smart. This is a very smart response here from Wild Rider, because how long, think about it, Playdom did this to us. You may have forgotten, but how long did we know about Magic and Rogue's uniforms before we got them? And as much as I loved the game when it was live, I mean, I'm not a shill for Playdom or anything, but I defended them to a lot of degree. I will say that I felt they held Magic and Rogue for when they had a void in their content, and they dropped it in there to be a cork and fill the void. They're like, that side, that coast is far away from this coast. We need to build a bridge right now. Oh, uniforms. Got it. Meeting over. I really did feel they did that. They just were like, we got to throw these guys a raft. 2 uniforms. All right, let's wait another month until we do something. Sorry, Playdom devs, if I'm way off base there, but that's what it felt like as a player. You just kind of thunk that down to fill a void. And that's where I think the MAAR writers can learn from that mistake and not tease something that shows up like 2.5 years later. Question 16. How many years worth of content do you think the MAAR writing staff has created so far? This is one of those questions that I'm asking for you, the viewer. That's very specifically what I was aiming for in this one, is I wanted you guys to feel confident in committing your emotions back to playing this game that died on you once. A lot of people were like, I don't know if I can do this again. This is for you guys. Bridget Rock says, that's a tough one. We don't know how often Goofy's going to release stuff, but I'd say it's a year's worth. So I'm going to move through this one a little quickly because it's generally the same thing. It's about a year depending upon how Goofy does his releases. So remember, Goofy has to release the original content in dribs and drabs before you get to the new stuff. So you will have a lot of time to catch up on the old stuff before you even hit the new stuff. The fact that the writers team has developed a year's worth of new stuff at a reasonable pace, that should make you feel happy and confident in dedicating your heart and brain back to playing MAAR again as MAAR. Question 17. Without revealing any current works in progress, what content would you like to see tackled? So what I was saying is, don't tell me about stuff you're working on. You as a person, what would you like to see appear in the game? And again, this one is a lot for you guys for the questions you asked me in comments. So BR says, it's a tough one since most of my ideal content is being worked on, but I want more Runaways. Panda, I want Clara from the Runaways. Black Max, no way I can answer this. I understand why he abstains from that one. Kirby, I love crazy world building stuff. So much more of the magic material since that side was lacking in MAA. There's the magic again. So again, you're seeing threads of personalities come through these questions. Oh, and I'd love to do some sort of adaptation of War of the Realms, mostly to fix the hatchet job done on Malekith by the MAA and the MCU. Midnight says, I'd like to see more of Marvel's history explored. Again, Midnight coming through with the Golden and Silver Age over here. He's coming through with the history. Some of these guys want to do modern stuff, and then Midnight wants to take you on a tour through the museum. Again, threads of personality coming through. The Golden Age heroes for a big part, and some of the other genres of comics such as westerns. I would love to see Kree Skrull Wars, hopefully Squadron Supreme, and Squadron Sinister someday. Genghis Khan, there are multiple characters who you never got to see their voice in-game, in quotes. It falls a bit flat. I'd like to see those characters be able to interact more freely. Jay says, characters. I'm SO1 after this, if you get my reference. I kind of don't on that one. Kelvin says, if you ask me, I'd say characters. LaFawn says, I'm a sucker for being C-list villains. I'll see who I can get away with. Lord says, I'd like to see the missing big names, Underwater Man and Surfboard Dude being the most notable. So Lord is sort of the voice of the YouTube people here. You know what his reference is to Underwater Man and Surfboard Dude because they are finally getting some representation in other Marvel games. A follow-up question, if I was doing this live, especially Lord, would be, do you, as a writer in MAA, now feel pressure to tackle the names of people who've historically been overlooked and are now showing up, such as Underwater Man and Surfboard Dude, because they're now showing up in games? I'm curious if the writers are like, shit, everybody else is doing them now. Now we really are going to be under pressure to do something with these characters. So, yeah, interesting question for there. If any of them watch this, maybe a comment would be cool for that. Otherwise, it would be cool to complete certain groups that may be missing a few members or only had one or two members, like Asgardians, Runaways, Young Avengers, New Mutants, X-Force. Also, lockboxes, if they make sense in the narrative. We actually have plans for most of my big wants, like everything else I want are B and C list characters and pretty specific alts for characters that would be cool but aren't critical for me. For me, give me my Firestar. A lot of what I wanted out of the game did eventually show up. As a kid, I had this one particular book by the Marvel game universe. It was EO through Mad Dog, so if the character's name fell E through M, I became really, really familiar with them. And Flag Smasher, because of this book, was a big thing for me because Flag Smasher looked so much like Space Ghost from the Hanna-Barbera shows that I had grown up with. And, I mean, look, that's Space Ghost, really, with a mace and the planet on his belt. So when he showed up in game, I was like, oh, yes. Not his methodology or anything like that, or his raison d'etre. It was his... This picture was like, God, that's fucking Space Ghost. That's so cool. And he showed up in game, so that treated something. And, of course, Firestar. I've said that in a lot of videos. The Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends cartoon when I was a kid with him and Iceman and Firestar, that's a big thing for me. She has shown up as a minor character in some games, like she was a team-up in Marvel Heroes. I would love to see Firestar come into something and actually be playable. I mean, we have tons of Bernie not villains, tons of Bernie heroes, but I'd love to see her get a shot at something. Question 18. Cannonball was the last mutant PD worked with when MAA was live. Can we hope to see a return to some new mutant-related content? This question is for both of us. You, the listener, and me. I had a vested interest in this because the mutant side of the Marvel Universe is my favorite, and it got even more solidly so when games began to abandon the mutants. I was fighting for the underdogs. It was like, you've taken the mutants out of the games, MAA stopped working on them, you're not working on them, you're not working on them. So I began to sort of fight for the little guy on this one, and now that they're coming back, I wanted to ask this for you guys, and I wanted to also ask it for me. So BR says, Boom Boom has been announced, so it's no secret we're going to have more mutants, but we have no ties to any film studio whatsoever, so who owns the rights don't affect us. BR touches upon something that I wasn't even implying. I wasn't like, because of the Fox ban or because of the split or the fact that Thundra couldn't be worthy because of the Fantastic Four shit. I didn't mean any of the political stuff in the question. I really meant the question at face value, but BR did touch upon the fact that there's no politics in this. Panda says, definitely, as writers, one of the first focuses were ensuring that mutants got back into the fold. BM says, alls I can say is we miss mutants in the last part of MAA, and we want to see more of them, so BM's a man after my own heart there. Kirby says, I don't know, but yes, Boom Boom is just the beginning. We missed our lovable mutants as much as y'all did. Pause for a second. Dazzler and Jubilee. Like, oh man, do people clamor to get Jubilee in games and Dazzler in games. Twig, I think, was a big one with Dazzler. But so many people want Miss mall-hopping 4th of July sparklers there. And like when she showed up in the X-Men movies, everybody's like, oh, amazing, there's Jubilee over there. It always... Dazzler I kind of get, but Jubilee always surprises me how much love there is for her, for somebody who didn't do much. I mean, just go watch I'm the Juggernaut Bitch, and you'll see how ineffectual that cartoon makes Jubilee seem. I mean, she just kind of sprinkled high-pitched sparklers at people, but Jubilee does open a world of things. Like if she's in there, maybe you can get a vampire Jubilee alt for her or something. But yeah, I just wanted to pause there that when it comes to mutant stuffs, Dazzler and Jubilee are ones that I always hear, especially Jubilee. In games that don't have him, people say Gambit, and he has started to show up in a few things now, at least Marvel Future Fight, not Strike Force. Nightcrawler was also one. I think people do that because of the classics, but Jubilee just kind of always surprises me. Anyway, back on topic. Dear Midnight, Dr. Midnight, there's a few I'd love to see and don't mind seeing, learning about ones I've never heard of. Ken says, in the words of Kevin Feige, Jace didn't answer. Kelvin says you're going to have to wait and see. LaFong says, I feel like we're ranging all over the MU, either in what we've written or talked about. Definitely plenty of mutants. Lord says there's nothing stopping us from tackling mutants or any part of the Marvel Universe. And Wild Rider says we miss mutants as much as you guys. We definitely have big plans for them. That being said, we are trying to cover the MU. Question 19. We're getting in the home stretch over here. Just a few more. Understandably, it could be hard to produce content around movies already passed. Does the writing team have plans to release content based on already published Marvel media? I did that as broad for comics, MCU, TV shows, MCU, Netflix, and movies that have happened. In the beginning of the video, when I said I asked questions for me and I asked questions for you, 19 is a big one for you. You guys ask me this a lot, and this one is me trying to serve you up a big Thanksgiving turkey, because everybody's like, are we going to get the Spec Ops we were supposed to get when the game died, the Doctor Strange one? Are we going to get an Endgame? Are we going to get an Infinity War? Because I'll tell you, if MAA was still live, you can bet there would have been an Infinity War, and then a year later, an Endgame, because there's way enough time to get in other Spec Ops in there. So I'm with you that I would bet Playdom would tackle at least those movies. Thor Ragnarok is another one you guys ask about a lot. So this is one for you guys. BR says, yes, there are some soft tie-ins on the way for past Marvel media. Panda, yes. BM, the MAA Playdom team had the advantage and the responsibility of being assigned Spec Ops well before the movies came out. We can't do that, but the MCU is a heavy source of inspiration for the MAR. Pause again. These guys will always tell you they will not follow a plot to a T the way that is represented in a comic or a movie, because that simply is a spit out and provides no creativity. That's taking an idea and opening the door and letting it walk in and shutting a door and saying, this is mine now. So do know that a lot of these responses will come from that perspective of they just don't want to bird puke something you already know and give it to you in the game. They may touch upon something like, let's say, this is hypothetical, I don't know that they're doing this, but I've read this comic series at least, House of M. If they're like, yeah, let's do a House of M Spec Ops, I don't think you would see them follow the plot of House of M 100%, where this guy does this guy does that lady does this, that lady does that. They don't want to do that. I mean, example, everybody says Apocalypse is a great SO. because they took what you might have expected and twisted it where you were dealing with Beast and you weren't dealing with Gambit and you weren't dealing with Wolverine, but you had Beast up there and then you had Iceman up there, and then they had things that you wouldn't have expected. So they will continue that. They will twist things within the confines of the box so that it's fresh and exciting. Kirby says, a bit, we have some soft and heavier adaptations planned, but nothing close to the one-to-one copy of SO14. Midnight says, there are some things that I hope to see us do that will be better than how Marvel did them. So Midnight's reaching for the stars there. Material can be potentially drawn from a comic, cartoon, video game, or even a movie. Don't ever expect the story to be the same as it appeared in its original medium. Just tackled that. It will never be an exact copy of the story, as MAA had plenty of precedent for that. So basically saying, in the words of Kevin Feige, sure, why not? Jason Kelvin, no answer. LaFong, I'll defer to Max. Lord, you guys will notice it if we take inspiration from the MCU. In other media, such as games and cartoons, Ryder says, we're never going to do a one-to-one adaptation for anything in the MCU. It wouldn't fit the story, it wouldn't fit how Playdom handled it. Their tie-in SOs were always very loose tie-ins that connected to the story they were telling. If we were theoretically to do an SO with a major MCU influence on it, it'd be loose. So now we're getting down to the last 4 or 5 here. Question 20. The writing team seems to be really on point in remembering who said what and when in their content. Is keeping rigorous continuity material hard? This is one that I asked for the writing team. I wanted them, again, to talk about moments where they shine and they do tremendously hard and grueling work for this stuff. Bridget Rock says, sometimes, yeah. Thankfully, we always have people who go back and check to see what's been done, what doesn't make sense, etc. We've all read the MA storyline recently as well, so that helps. Panda says, sort of? Some of us act as lore masters that have MAA mostly memorized, so those people keep track naturally. BM says, we have an enormous set of documents that are constantly being written, rewritten, and updated. Other than that, what Ken says. That'll be later. Ken has it right. We are pretty anal about making sure everything still lines up. Hell, we occasionally go back and adjust previous material, usually delivery or info that comes across, if we think it's lacking or we found a better way. Midnight says, always checking and referencing, and if necessary, correcting. Genghis Khan in comics and movies and TV, you have a writing team depart and a new writing team come on board, so you notice a lack of continuity in cases. It breaks the narrative flow. You wind up plot holes and retcons that sometimes the reasons do not hold water. We self-police. Jason Kelvin didn't answer. LaFong says what Ken says. Wild Rider says what Ken says. And Lord says the others explained it perfectly, keeping continuity. It's definitely easier due to us with major story arcs planned. Alright, we are down to the last 4 questions here. Are there any characters you feel you could never bring to the game as playable due to their immense power levels? So this is one of the questions that I'm asking for the audience, because I know that a lot of people are like, hey, you know, Adam Warlock is super juiced and jacked, and we got him. What's going to happen? Are we going to get any Eternals or, you know, Ego, for example, who is a planet? This is to help people temper their expectations and everything. So Bridget Rock says, we're working on a certain way to make justice to OP characters without changing the regular gameplay's natural rules. But even so, I do think there are limits. Panda says, one above all. BM says, good grief, absolutely. It's called power creep. And we are very aware of the pitfalls caused by that. And here's something, if I can break in for a moment. You have to realize that power creep does affect writers along with character people in a sense, because if the game starts off with somewhat fairly vanilla-ish tunes because nobody's really found their imagination yet and thought outside the box, and then later on characters get that way, what happens when you introduce a basic character or a vanilla character? People are like, oh, that sucks and blah blah blah. Like, take, for example, Cammy that we talked about in this document. If Cammy was introduced 5 months into the game being live, would you still find Cammy garbage compared to that very original roster? When she was introduced so much later, and there were uniforms making characters great, and there were other characters who were born great when they were created, Cammy paled in comparison, and people hated her. That is something that pins character creators and writers in to a corner. It literally paints them in there, because how much longer can you keep introducing a hot and sexy character before you're breaking the rules of the game? You've created the hottest, sexiest character of all, and then everything pales in comparison. So tempering the community's ideas of what is a strong and good and fun character has to be out there, because otherwise people are eventually going to want a character that's a god because of all the characters that came before them that were near gods or demigods to begin with. So the community has to be honest with themselves and realize not everybody is going to be a Worthy. Not everybody's going to be a Cloak and Dagger or Fiza. We have to be accepting of characters that are a little underwhelming if it is appropriate for them. Now, underwhelming and not fun are two very distinct things. You can have a character that's just kind of vanilla, but it's still fun to play, or has a personality that comes through in their interactions with the agent, or the way their abilities run and everything like that. So this is where you need to appreciate the development group and the writers group, because they have to work with a box that the audience feels exists and a box that characters themselves create. So keep that in mind. Diabetic Kirby, me, which is why I've been trapped in this Kirby life form. Haha, just kidding, I'm not trapped. But yeah, I mean, I doubt we could really use Eternity or any of his kind or their kind without inviting that very problem, for instance. Midnight says, I really doubt that certain characters will ever become playable. That is a challenge, and doesn't mean that is an attempt might not be made. Ken says, there's limits within the game framework that hinder the ability to tell a compelling story without insane power levels. When you introduce a plot thread of a massive scale, you can't have a singular character have the capability to solve all the problems and make other characters redundant, but hero response must also be suited for the threat. A cosmic level hero is weird to see in a street level story as much as a street level hero being a speed bump for a near omnipotent foe. Jace says Sentry for one. Kelvin says, I guess several characters have power levels beyond what we can do. Lafong, I'd never say never, but I wouldn't be crazy about dropping Death or Eternity or the Beyonder into the game, at least as playable characters. Lord, I personally believe if we write it correctly, pretty much any character aside from those whose concepts such as death, or can simply wipe out everyone with a thought, can be done in the right context, and writer says BR said it best. Question 22. What Marvel works are you looking forward to? BR says WandaVision is my number one. Most look moving forward. I'm super glad it was not only pushed forward but renewed for a second season already. Panda agrees. Black Max says, I wanted to riot when Netflix started canceling the MCU shows, so I want them, all of them, back now, please, and the new stuff too. Kirby says, WandaVision, Moon Knight, the possibility that Brother Voodoo is appearing in the Strange sequel, Shang-Chi. Midnight, not so much a future work, but I'm really looking forward to snagging a copy of Adam, Legend of Blue Marble, TPB. Want it so bad, but it was a low print run, low distribution, and very high cost. So there's Midnight's personality coming through again. Ken, I'd like to see the MCU attempt on the multiverse. I watched the Arrowverse take and saw how they tried to account for otherwise distinctly separate canon into one overall canon with Crisis. I think they were largely successful. Now it's time for the MCU to take a crack at it. I look at it as a representation of what we're trying to do with the MAAR reality, taking influence and illusions from games, movies, comics, cartoons, and trying to create a canon for MAAR. In case you didn't know, MAAR's Earth is an Earth that only exists in MAA and MAAR and nowhere else. Check it out. It's interesting. I want to see how the whole Eternity mask works out and see how his powers work. Personally, any work involving Kitty Pryde, LaFong, Moon Knight, and Shang-Chi, Lord, Marvel Avengers Alliance Redux. Way to cheerlead for the project, Lord. Wild Rider Guardians of the Galaxy 3. I absolutely love the GOTG movies, and it was my favorite movie in general for GOTG 1. Thor, Love and Thunder. Taika Waititi is one of my favorite directors. The Square Enix Avengers game. I'm that weirdo who actually think it looks good. It's getting better, Ryder, but it did start off looking like absolute poo. And MAAR, of course. Do you play any other Marvel-related games? As question 23. Bridget Rock says, I play Future Fight and Puzzle Quest right now, but I've played all of the currently active ones at least once. I used to love Avengers Academy. Was super sad to see it go. Panda, Marvel Future Fight, and MPQ. Black Max, nope, none of them hold a candle to MAAR. Kirby, none of the mobiles, though I loved playing through Ultimate Alliance games. Do the Lego games count? Because I fucking love those. Midnight says Marvel Future Fight as part of the Trout Nation Alliance. Ken says Marvel Strike Force. Being in the US, I snuck into the New Zealand soft launch and kept quiet until global launch. With Ken on that one. Did the same thing. Jace says, before Future Fight, COC, Strike Force, Battle Lines, and now Puzzle Quest. I'm with Jace on this one too. I have done all of those except for Puzzle Quest. And I can also add I'm doing Marvel Super Wars, which is the MOBA. But not yet. I log in daily, but I haven't played yet because I want to play with touch controls, not PC controls. Kelvin, Marvel Puzzle Quest. LaFong, I play Strike Force. It's okay, but nothing like MAA. Lord, I tried to play most of the games at some point, but since my phone can't handle them, I couldn't commit to them as much as I could MAA, and I stopped playing them years ago. I'm a huge fan of MUA, however. I currently play MFF and MPQ for Wild Rider. I've played pretty much every other Marvel mobile game as well, but dropped them all. I also was a big fan of Avengers Academy because it had great dialogue and character designs. I also played the first 2 Ultimate Alliance games and all 3 LEGO games. MAA was by far the best of all the mobile Marvel games. Question 24. How would it feel to play MAAR content you've worked on? Meaning, like, for example, you were major writing force behind Spec Ops 38 and now you're playing your own work. How would it feel? BR says, honestly, I'm looking forward to that moment. I can't wait. Panda says, awe-inspiring. BM says, I can't wait to hear how much fun others are having with it. That's probably me. I would be, if I did a Spec Ops and somebody said I loved it, or I loved the character, or the gear was great, or like, wow, that was a fun Spec Ops, I'd probably just sit there with unable to breathe and just be chewing on the inside of my cheeks because I'll be like, wow, this is so amazing to hear from somebody. Diabetic Kirby says, surreal. Midnight says, I really, really want to. I can't hardly wait. Really need to get to Season 2 and get this weapon. I wonder what Midnight's looking for. Ken, I'm conflicted. I think halfway through playing my own content, I'll come to the conclusion that I should have written something differently. That's sad. It's rough to be that tough on your own works, but I've seen it. My girlfriend gets that way with her art a lot. Jace, wonderful with all our collective efforts coming into fruition. Calvin says, exciting, just exciting. LaFong, can't wait. Lord says, I'm so hyped to play the content that the rest of the team has worked on alongside what I've contributed. And Ryder says, I can't wait. It's one of the things I'm most excited for. And finally, the last question, Coffee 25. Coffee or tea, pie or cake? Bridget Rock says, I'm not a big fan of coffee or tea, but if I had to choose coffee, chocolate frappuccino from Starbucks, if we're being specific, and cake. Panda says coffee and pie. BM says tea please with pie. It's a funny question since it calls to mind a running joke in MAAR, but you don't want to hear about that. Kirby says none of them, Dr. Pepper and water and cheesecake. Man, Kirby, why did you have to be the buzzkill? Midnight says coffee and shoe fly pie. Genghis Ken says a flat white with 2 sugars. The correct choice between pie and cake is always Chicago-style pizza pie. I will fight you to the death on that one because I am a New York style pizza person because I grew up on Long Island, New York. However, I also like Sicilian, and when you leave New York, Sicilian is called Detroit style. That is what my girlfriend and I get the most from the Jets, is the Jet Special, which is, well, not, it's called L Jets, but L Jets is basically a Detroit style pepperoni. It's Sicilian with pepperoni is really what it is, but it's affectionately called Detroit. So personally, I would pick what, like, Domino's. If you're out in New York, the closest is what Domino calls a Brooklyn pie, or maybe even Sbarro if you have one of those in a mall by you. But I will fight anybody New York versus Chicago when it comes to pizza. As Sean Stewart, you can find us on YouTube over here. I wonder if it is here. Sean Stewart. There it is. Yep, it's this one over here. Sean Stewart's like, this is basically soup that you poured on top of some pizza crust. There's a reason why Chicago style has sauce on top. It is because it's so thick and dense, it needs to cook so long that if the cheese was on top, the cheese would burn. So that's why the sauce is on top. That's why he calls it a soup that you put on some pizza dough. LaFong says, no, don't want to, I missed a couple people here. Jay says tea, preferably chai, and a slice of pie a la mode. Chai tea, the smell gets to me a little bit sometimes. I had some people at a former job that made chai tea a lot, and when you go into the break room after 3 or 4 cups of chai tea were brewed, you just kind of want to die inside. If it's tea for me, I'm generally a kind of a standard black tea. Green tea's good, and I also have a fondness for white tea, but chai's a little much for me. Kelvin says, coffee over tea any day for me, unless it's the tea that comes with Chinese dim sum. As for the later, I guess cake. LaFong says coffee and pie, but I wouldn't turn down any of it. That's me. I drink coffee, I drink tea. I drink tea if I want a little less caffeine, like maybe it's later in the night. Trivia for you guys. The amount of tea in a cup, the amount of caffeine in a cup of tea is typically less than coffee. However, if you take a pound of coffee and a pound of tea, the tea has more caffeine in it. You just use less tea to make your cup. Lord, I'm surprised I'm not the only one who doesn't drink either coffee or tea. Chocolate mud cake, please. I go with him on that. Anything chocolate's good for me. Wild Rider, I don't drink either one, but pie over cake. But I'll gladly take a cinnamon roll over pie. So there you go, guys. It's a little chopped up. I recorded this in about 3 or 4 different sessions. That pretty much covers everything. Again, I want to come back to a few things I said in the beginning of the video. Some of these questions were for me. Some of them were to highlight the writers team and give them a chance to shine a spotlight on themselves. And some of the questions were for you, the audience, based on a lot of the comments that I would get in the videos, or questions that people, quote-unquote, on the street come up to me and ask. I hope this was very informative. I hope this shines a light on a team that up until now has been extremely hardworking, but very unsung. Not everybody knows what goes on with the writers team because it's in private, and it needs to be, and it should remain that way after the video. Again, I'm telling you all, do not approach these people like it's the zoo. They will fling their poo at you if you begin to harass them. Let them do their work. Don't ask them for spoilers. Don't ask them for reveals before they're willing to do as such. Absolutely let these guys do what they need to do. And I can tell you from editing a bunch of the content that they have, you people have nothing to worry about. What you see from this group will be as good as what you got from the game when it was done through Playdom. Whether you find it for better or for worse, I cannot begin to give you that opinion right now. I will tell you, in a vacuum, compared to nothing else, their work is great. They put a ton of effort to make sure tone is unified, continuity. You know, they talk about continuity in movies, that a coffee cup is there and then it disappears and then it reappears between shots. They have to make sure literally everything they write isn't that disappearing coffee cup. And they have to go back to their notes, which means the note keeper has to be meticulous. They have to have access to their old works to make sure their new works are... They do a tremendous amount of work. It is nearly a job that nobody's getting paid for and everybody is volunteering for. BM keeps these guys in line and really ties a lot of these people together, even during moments of adverse health and weather out on the coast of North Carolina with hurricanes and everything. So definitely toss a coin to your writers. Oh, they are the friends of the Marvel Avengers Alliance Redux humanity. So I hope you enjoyed the video, and I hope you enjoyed a little bit of a behind the scenes look on the very important writers team. Ciao, everybody.